This is Docere Digest podcast, breaking down health concepts. This podcast is brought to you by Docere Life Center. This innovative clinic is finding new solutions to the evolving challenges mankind faces in the 21st century. By utilizing cutting-edge technology and testing, they find root causes and also offer treatment with energy and nutrition. What is the mission? To dynamically change lives for the better while impacting families for generations. The information shared directly or indirectly in the Docere Digest podcast is not to be understood as or misconstrued as medical advice. This information is not a replacement for your current health provider who is acutely aware of your current health state and course of treatment. Any information shared about a product or service discussed by any host or guest on this podcast is not to be interpreted as a doctor-patient relationship.
Hello and welcome to a special. My name is Dr. Luke Moore with Docere Life Center. I'm really excited to share this presentation with you today. Our presentation is part of a new service, the newest service that we are launching at our clinic at Docere Life Center that I'm spearheading. And this is our presentation today is going to be on obesity and toxicity, the hidden connection. All right, so let's just open it up. So first, a word. A lot of these concepts, I'm going to try to keep it as plain and as simple as possible, but some of these terms and processes in the body might sound a little Greek to you, and that's okay. They certainly did to me when I first dove into all this as a student. So with that said, buckle up and enjoy the ride. All right, so moving on here. So let's start with our first problem, and that is obesity, specifically obesity in the U.S. So 73.6% of U.S. adults over the age of 20 are either overweight or obese. The CDC defines obesity as a common, costly, and serious disease. Obesity in kids, 1 in 5 kids in the U.S. are obese. Only 2 out of 5 young adults are fit for basic training in the military. And fewer than 1 in 10 children and adults eat the daily recommended values of vegetables, and fewer than 1 in 4 kids are meeting their daily exercise needs. And obesity leads to various conditions and diseases, such as metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, certain types of cancer, asthma, sleep apnea, musculoskeletal pain due to the increased pressure on joints, osteoarthritis, gallstones, and gallbladder dysfunction. The most common causes of mortality in the United States, let's just go ahead and take a look at that now, are these here. You can see heart disease, certain types of cancer, stroke, respiratory disease, diabetes, and kidney disease down here. These are all things, if you go back to what I said on the previous slide, that obesity can lead to these certain types of causes of death. And as conservative amounts of 40% of the leading causes of death are preventable, according to the CDC. And it's probably even higher than that. I've read some sources say up to 80%. And the summary here is that this country has a serious obesity and overweight issue. Our future is in jeopardy due to our kids being at high risk for being overweight or obese and the conditions that leads to. And also our military preparedness is at risk because of the amount of kids that aren't able to even perform basic training, or young adults. And then again, just to conclude here, with the obesity issue, obesity can lead to these certain types of top causes of mortality in the United States. Next up is toxicity. Again, obesity and toxicity, what's the connection? So, what is a toxin? I think it's a little bit of a buzzword in today's day and age. In the immortal words of one of my favorite characters, Inigo Montoya from the 80s cult classic, The Princess Bride, where he says, "You keep saying that word. I do not think it means what you think it means." And I think that's true for toxicity. I think this is where the functional medicine crowd can get a bad rap, because I think a lot of people throw this term around loosely without really knowing what even is a toxin. So let's define that. Toxins, there's several different kinds, but for the purpose of our discussion, let's just highlight a few of them. We have toxic elements such as heavy metals. Think of like your periodic elements on the chart in your chemistry class. Things like lead, arsenic, mercury, and uranium. And then we also have naturally occurring toxins such as mold and aflatoxins. And you also have pesticides and herbicides and insecticides. And then a major one that I really want to stress and emphasize here are what are called persistent organic pollutants. And these are lipophilic compounds. And what lipophilic means is that means it's fat loving. So you have different kind of toxins. Some are water soluble, some are fat soluble. And the fat soluble ones, as we'll get to in a minute, have an affinity for fatty tissue in the body. And then lastly, we have volatile organic compounds, which are things like paint or aromatic compounds, gas or fuel, and then lastly, plastics. So when it comes to weight loss or obesity and being overweight, is detoxification important? This is such a hot button and controversial issue in not only the functional medicine crowd, but in traditional medicine and even in the fitness industry. So is it a fact or is it a myth? Let's move on. So the next problem is, are we exposed to toxins in this country? How many chemicals are in our society today? Well, I would say that it's just probably incalculable at this point. According to the American Chemical Society, about 200,000 chemicals are added each week to the database. The Environmental Wellness Group, or the EWG, did a fascinating study. As a small cohort, granted, but 10 American babies or newborns had their fetal cord blood analyzed, and there were shocking results that found 287 chemicals found in the fetal cord blood. 80 of these caused cancer in humans and animals, and 217 of these are neurotoxic to the brain and to the nerves, and 208 of those chemicals can cause birth defects. And the reason that's important is because think about brain, the neurotoxic side, brain and the nervous system. Well, what is the brain and nervous system primarily composed of? Fat. And remember back to those different types of toxins, some are what are called lipophilic, which have a high affinity for fatty tissues in the body. Next, a Canadian study on newborns corroborated the findings of the EWG, and that 137 chemicals were found in these Canadian newborns in this study. And it contained things like dioxins, persistent organic pollutants, and various types of pesticides as well. Another fascinating study looked at in the NHANES looked at the fact that toxicity does not discriminate. In other words, it does not matter what your socioeconomic status is. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter. Toxicity or toxins, things like plastics, persistent organic pollutants, heavy metals, and various types of pesticides were found in both demographics of higher socioeconomic status and lower socioeconomic status. A CDC study in 2015 and 2017 looked at thousands of Americans, and particularly samples of blood and urine. And in 2015, we had 265 chemicals that were identified in the cohort. And in 2017, that number jumped up to 308 chemicals. Where is this coming from? The thought or the misconception is, well, we live in a clean country. We live in a modernized, industrialized country. It's not like we're living in a developing nation or anything like that, where they might have more issues with cleanliness and sanitary health practices and these types of things. Aren't we clean? Where is this coming from? Well, if you look, a good source that I like to use is, again, the EWG, the Environmental Wellness Group. And basically where we seem to be getting this from is there's toxins in our water supply, our food, the air we breathe. And then also I put fear and stress can make one more susceptible to having issues with these types of things. And you guys, I don't mean this to be a scare tactic, not at all. I'm merely trying to draw attention to an issue that I believe is widely overlooked, especially when it comes to weight loss. So moving on to the next issue or the next problem to tackle is, are we toxic? So let's highlight the current medical understanding of toxicity and detox. Typically, what happens, according to the medical understanding, is we ingest or absorb or breathe in or inhale a toxin, and it's excreted fairly quickly via the body's own detox pathways, particularly the liver, the bowels, and the kidneys. But is that always so? If it's a water-soluble toxin, then yes, I agree that those compounds in an otherwise healthy person are likely detoxified quickly, for sure. But what if they're fat-soluble toxins? Remember those lipophilic compounds or the fat-loving compounds? Well, these can be stored in the body's fatty tissue, our adipose tissue. It can also be stored in tissue like, again, neurotoxic compounds like to act upon the brain and the nerves of the body, especially those persistent organic pollutants. Next, I want to talk about a very fascinating process that occurs in the body, and this is where I said buckle up and enjoy the ride, is enterohepatic recirculation. If you break down that word enterohepatic, entero refers to the gut or the GI system, and hepatic refers to the liver. So literally the word can be broken down into gut, liver, recirculation. And this is a process where toxins undergo detoxification in the liver and get converted from a fat-soluble to a water-soluble compound. Good. So a lot of those fat-soluble toxins we mentioned, this is what should be happening. Okay, they should be getting converted via phases 0 through 3 detoxification in the liver, where they're converted again from a fat-soluble toxin to a water-soluble toxin. And then these toxins, where do they go from there? So they go from the liver into the bile, into the gallbladder, which then goes to the small intestine, to the large intestine, then ultimately out through the stool or the bowel movement. But enterohepatic recirculation is a process whereby the toxin goes from the large intestine back to the liver instead of going from the large intestine out through the stool. You can kind of see a helpful picture here of that. So this is where we go from liver to gallbladder into the gut. But instead of that happening, we're coming back from the large intestine and back to the liver. So let's go back a previous slide here. You think with that said that we might be toxic? Well, let's finish up our concept here on enterohepatic recirculation. So instead of it going again from the large intestine out through the stool, it's going back to the liver. And the kicker here, guys, is this process can occur 14 to 17 times for a given toxin. And that's just one toxin. Okay, now imagine someone who has a high level of toxicity. Okay, someone who has been exposed to POPs or persistent organic pollutants, pesticides, herbicides, volatile organic compounds, paint, gas, fuel, etc. Imagine the liver trying to keep up with that burden. Okay, do you think we might be toxic? I think so. And I love Napoleon Dynamite, so I had to use that. So what does all this mean? What's the connection here, right? Do toxins make us fat? I don't think so. Not for most people, okay? The thing that makes most people fat at the end of the day is probably going to be due to being in a caloric surplus or eating too much, okay? Which is going to create more fatty tissue, which can then lead to increase in the amount of toxicity in the body. Because again, remember that these toxins that we are most likely drinking or consuming or breathing in or absorbing in are going to be stored somewhere, okay? Especially when you begin to compound other health issues on top of that. So do the toxins make us fat? No. But I do think that when we try to achieve weight loss, we want to pay close attention to that, and I'll elaborate here. So the ultimate connecting point here, you guys, between obesity and toxicity is toxins are mobilized as fats are being burned, okay? So when we're eating less or we're trying to be in a caloric deficit, okay, and we're exercising and we're stimulating what's called lipolysis, or literally fat breaking down or burning fat in the body, these toxins that are stored there are going to be mobilized, okay? And we have to, as practitioners, I believe it's our job to help facilitate and address this and make sure that the patient's firing on all cylinders as they're losing weight, and that we're detoxifying appropriately, and that there's no compounding issues. So where do these toxins go? Again, they're going to go to the liver. The body's got to process it somewhere, okay? And if there's a burden on the liver, if there's, digestive issues or sluggish gallbladder, or sluggish liver detoxification even, or other compounding health issues, I don't believe the body's going to be handling this burden appropriately with these increased toxins that are being mobilized in the body. So what do we do about all this? Well, that's where we come in. Here's your fork in the road. Here's our decision. We got to make a decision on where to go. So what to do? We got to determine the best course of action for you. Okay? Everyone's unique. And what I'm going to talk about here at the end, this is not a cookie cutter approach, you guys. Everyone is a unique person. Everyone's going to have unique circumstances and unique needs. And we got to address that. So we got to determine the best course of action for you. We utilize questionnaires like a cell blueprint. In other words, we're going to look at what do your cells need in order to be healthy, or what different kind of systems are at play that could be inhibiting us from achieving our weight loss goals or our health goals. We also have a toxicity questionnaire that's very evidence-based, and it's going to look at what's the likelihood of us having an increased toxic burden in the body. And if so, the more severe, the more we got to pay attention to that, I think. And then from there, we strategize, we game plan, we look at, what treatment plans or treatment plan is going to be the best fit for you. And that's where we come in. Our program is called Reclaim, because at Docere Life Center, our motto is that we want to help optimize and reclaim your health. So Reclaim, the last weight loss program you'll ever need. What all is within Reclaim? You guys, it's going to be one appointment. We got to start somewhere. Like I said, we got to determine the best course of action for you. It's a 45-minute appointment, a very in-depth consultation in which we're going to be going over very thorough and comprehensive health intake forms. We're going to be going over that cell blueprint to determine what do your cells need in order to be healthy, and what potential systems are at play that need addressed to help us achieve our health goals. We're going to be looking at that toxicity assessment to see what's the likelihood of us having an increased toxic burden or load on the body. And then from there, from all those findings and gathering all that information, we're going to be able to make a recommendation for a treatment plan that's going to be very unique to you, which is going to include blood work recommendations, diet and lifestyle recommendations, which are going to be the cornerstone and foundation of what we do. Because at the end of the day, there's no secret sauce. There's no fancy pill or injection or anything that's going to give us a shortcut there. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to hard work and diligence and consistency and working alongside each other as a team to once and for all accomplish your health goals. And then we conclude, like I said, by choosing a plan that's going to be the best fit for your specific needs. You guys, if this is something that you're all interested in, I strongly advise you to call the clinic. Call us at Docere Life Center at 316-531-3030 and ask the staff that you'd like to get started, or tell them you'd like to get started with your Reclaim consultation with Dr. Luke, and we'll get you all squared away. I'm very excited. I really want to thank you for your time in joining me today for this presentation. I would absolutely love the honor to be able to work alongside you to achieve your weight loss and your health goals. Thank you so much. I look forward to reclaiming your health. God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Docere Digest podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. You can also find all the episodes and show notes over at docerelifecenter.com. While you're on the website, also be sure to check out the blog where you'll find videos and articles to help you proactively rebalance your health.